Zechariah 12, a prophecy, the word of the Lord concerning Israel, the Lord who stretches out the heavens, who lays the foundation of the earth, and who forms the human spirit or the spirit of man within a person, declares, I am going to make Jerusalem a cup that sends all the surrounding peoples reeling. Judah will be besieged as well as Jerusalem on that day when all the nations of the earth are gathered against her. I will make Jerusalem an immovable rock for all the nations. All who try to move it will injure themselves. This past Wednesday, if you missed it, December 6, 2017 was an event of colossal magnitude, gigantic politically, historically, biblically, and prophetically. This past Wednesday, America, through President Donald Trump, recognized Jerusalem as the capital of the nation of Israel. This had never taken place in all the years of Israel's existence, in all of its 70 years. Not only had America never recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, no nation had. It was the first nation or major power to do it. What does this mean politically, historically, biblically, prophetically, and to your life? Let's begin by looking at the context. How do we get here? History of Jerusalem in a nutshell, about 3,500 years in a nutshell. Originally called Salem or Shalem, a king, one of the first things we see about him, or see in the Bible about it, is Melchizedek, is the king of Salem. That's Jerusalem. He blesses Abraham. God says, I will do all these things in the place I will show you. You will gather together. That's Jerusalem. It was as though there were pagans by the time that the armies of Israel got there, it was a pagan place, the Jebusites. God gave it to them through David. Israel won it, and David purchased the Temple Mount for Israel. Actually, it's the one time that that place has been purchased, and nobody else has ever purchased it. That's the legal right. It goes back from David, who purchased it for Israel. Just by that, it tells you something. Outside of that, Jerusalem has only been taken by conquest, like other lands, except Jerusalem is the most fought-over city on planet Earth. When you look at the rights of nations, their claims are based on basically, we took it from someone else or from another tribe or something like that. One way, that's how man generally works. But when you look at that, but Jerusalem has been the capital of Israel, the holy city. You look at Psalm 122, I was glad when they said, let us go up to the house of the Lord, Jerusalem. Our feet are standing within your gates. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They will prosper who love you. This is where the temple was, the capital of the United Kingdom of David and Solomon. Then it breaks into two, and the bottom part is Judah has Jerusalem. The Babylonians come in to destroy it in 586 BC. And the Jewish people sing by the waters of Babylon, the psalm, we sat down and wept as we remembered Zion, Jerusalem. If I forget you, Jerusalem, may my right hand lose its cunning. God then brings them back and tells them to rebuild the city, rebuild the temple, Zerubbabel, Ezra, Nehemiah. They rebuild the temple, they rebuild the city, they rebuild the walls. It is again the capital of Israel. And then come the Greeks, the Syrian Greeks, Antiochus Epiphanes, who takes over Jerusalem. This is what we are going to next week, Hanukkah. Jerusalem is in the hands of enemies. It becomes a pagan city for a moment, captive, the temple a pagan captive, and then God raises up the Maccabees. There's a miracle of a victory, and it is Hanukkah, the rededication. Jerusalem is restored again. That is next week. And then the Maccabees rule. They become the kings of Israel. Jerusalem is again the place where the people of Israel come up every year, 3 times a year, to worship the Lord together. The temple, but then the Romans come and they take over. Herod, Messiah, rides into Jerusalem on a donkey. Messiah weeps over Jerusalem. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how much he loves Jerusalem. And he weeps when he sees what's going to happen to Jerusalem and his people. He will be crucified in Jerusalem. He will rise from the dead in Jerusalem. Our redemption takes place in Jerusalem. Our faith begins in Jerusalem. He ascends from Jerusalem to God. And he is asked as he's about to ascend, is it at this time you will restore the kingdom to Israel? He doesn't say, no, I'm not going to do that. He says, it's not for you to know when. In other words, he will restore the kingdom to Israel. And you can't restore the kingdom to Israel without restoring the city of the kingdom of Israel, Jerusalem. And just as he was there in Jerusalem and he ascended until that time, the angel said, do you not know that he will come back the same way? Which means what? He will come back to Jerusalem. What happened? But what happened to Jerusalem after that, after the Bible, until now? He said, Jerusalem shall be trodden down by the Gentiles or the nations until the time of the Gentiles are fulfilled. In 70 AD, what he wept over comes to pass. What he prophesied comes to pass. The Romans surround the city and they lay siege to it and they destroy it, leaving not one stone of the temple upon another. They take the Jewish people and take them captive into the nations. Jerusalem is burning in ruins, as is the land of Israel. The next century, the emperor of Rome bans all Jews from being in the city, except on one day, the 9th of Av, the day they destroyed the temple. He renames Jerusalem, makes it a pagan city, puts up pagan temples. Rome renames the land to erase any connection to the Jewish people, calls it Palestina or Palestine. That's where we get that from, named after the Philistines. Palestine means the land of the Philistines. And so it is known for that for 2,000 years. The word actually Palestinian literally means Philistine. Some churches and maps have that on there. They say Palestine in the time of Jesus, there was no such thing. But there was a Jerusalem now. It is taken over, so it is now a pagan city. But then Rome splits into two. Jerusalem falls under the eastern part, the Byzantine kingdom, Byzantium. It is, quote, Christianized, becomes a holy city of that. But Byzantium ends up persecuting the Jews. Then a new force arises, Islam, Mohammed in the desert. He sweeps across the desert and his armies sweep across. Ultimately, they take the land of Israel and Jerusalem. They are shown the holy sites, the Temple Mount, and the policy they have is to build mosques on the holy sites and make them the highest in whatever city they are. So on the Temple Mount, they build the Dome of the Rock, the Mosque of Omar, and the El-Aqsa Mosque. They declare it the third holiest site in Islam. Jerusalem is called by them Al-Quds, or the Holy. Did Muhammad ever go to Jerusalem? Never. Later, there was a tale added that he went in a vision to Jerusalem. How many times does the Quran mention Jerusalem? 0. But what they did is, Muhammad expected the Jews to follow the new faith, but they didn't, and so he turned against them, and instead of Jerusalem, he replaced it with Mecca. Mecca is based on Jerusalem, became the new center. And the Muslims rule Jerusalem. Christian holy sites are converted into mosques. Jews and Christians are treated as oppressed people. Then come the Crusades. The call for the Crusades to save the Holy Land from the Muslims, though the Crusaders come and they kill Muslims and kill Jews and kill Christians. And they wipe out populations. They take Jerusalem, called the Crusader kingdom, lasts just a little bit until Saladin defeats them in Galilee, and again it becomes Muslim again, Jerusalem. And there are several Muslim dynasties that come and go. Then comes the rise of a new empire, the Ottoman Turkish Empire. The Ottoman Empire takes over Jerusalem and Israel and the Arab world. The Ottomans are Muslim, but they're not Arab, they're Turkish. They're seen by the Arabs as an occupying force. The Ottoman Empire will rule the Middle East, Israel, and Jerusalem for 400 years. Into the 20th century, the Ottoman Empire becomes increasingly anti-Jewish, and they persecute the Jews. Then comes World War I, and in that war, the Ottoman Empire comes against the British Empire. The British Empire comes into the Middle East and wins the land of Israel and the city of Jerusalem. And for the first time in ages, Israel and Jerusalem, it is not under Muslim control, but it's under the sovereignty of a power that is actually, it is a, quote, Christian nation. Britain had a revival before this and a love for the Jewish people at that time, so God set it all up. They're actually, for the first time in 2,000 years since Rome, they are the first power favorable to the Jewish people. And they open up the land for the Jewish people. And they begin returning in greater numbers, Jewish people coming home. And England will later turn against the Jewish people or against the policy, and then comes World War II, when the Jewish people need to get out of Europe because of Hitler. But now Britain kind of closes the door. And finally, at the end of the war, and the British Empire, when they turned against Israel, they collapse. But now Britain has enough of it and gives the issue over to the newly formed United Nations not far from here. It was in Queens, New York. The UN votes to divide the land of Israel into two, an Arab land and a Jewish land. And for Jerusalem, as for Jerusalem, the United Nations says no one will get it. It will be a corpus separatum, a separate body under international or UN control. The Jewish people say this is not really what we were looking for, but it's a lot better than what we have. So yes, the Arab nations say no, we want all of it. On May 14th, 15th, into the next day, the British mandate ends, 1948. Israel declares its nationhood. America, first nation to recognize it. The Arab nations move in to destroy it, the reborn nation at its birth, but miraculously Israel survives. And in the conflict, Jordan seizes Jerusalem. Now, the United Nations has condemned Israel for having Jerusalem again and again and again and again. It is condemned for other things too. The United Nations, if you didn't know it, has condemned Israel not only more than any other nation on earth, but has condemned it more than it has condemned any other nation on earth put together. Yet when Jordan seized Jerusalem, there wasn't one United Nations resolution against it. But not only did they take Jerusalem, they banned the Jewish people, they destroyed the Jewish quarter, they made Jewish holy sites garbage dumps, took Jewish gravestones from the Mount of Olives and used them to build bathrooms. There wasn't one United Nations condemnation. 19 years later, the Six-Day War breaks out. Miraculously, Israel wins and regains its ancient capital of Jerusalem. Israeli soldiers, for the first time, walking the streets of Jerusalem since the time of Rome. This is what the world has been trying to undo ever since the Six-Day War. Now let's look at the big picture. That was over 3,000 years of history. There are all sorts of powers and claims on Jerusalem. So the question is, in the last 4,000 years, how many nations have had Jerusalem as its capital? With a possible exception of that little Crusader kingdom that lasted less than a century and questionable, in 4,000 years, only one nation has had Jerusalem as its capital, the nation of Israel.
To find out how you can receive more of Jonathan's teachings, to receive special free gifts, or get in touch, go to hopeoftheworld.org or call toll-free 1-800-YESHUA-1. That's hopeoftheworld.org or call 1-800-YESHUA-1. That's 1-800-937-4821. You can also get more at Jonathan Cahn's Facebook page or write us direct at Hope of the World, Box 1111, Lodi, New Jersey 07644, USA. Hope of the World is dedicated to the goal of spreading God's Word and salvation to every land and people. We do this by spreading the Word throughout the world and sponsoring compassion projects to the most poor and needy around the earth. To get in touch or have a part in God's work, just write to Hope of the World, Box 1111, Lodi, New Jersey 07644, USA. Or go to hopeoftheworld.org or call 1-800-YESHUA-1. That's 1-800-937-4821.